It's almost back to school time, and in this video I have some friendly reminders that you can add to that overwhelming to-do list, I know, that will help you and your students rock back to school. Let's get started. Do you feel a little overwhelmed, maybe anxious or worried about back to school? Sometimes we as teachers forget that our students feel that way too. So in this video today, I want to talk about just some friendly reminders just to keep in mind during that first week with interacting with your kids, how to build that relationship and also make them feel comfortable in the classroom. So let's get right to it. So my first friendly reminder, and if you see me looking over here, it's because I'm looking at my notes. I typed them up this time. So, number one, don't assume that kids know how to do everything or anything. Please don't assume that. No matter how little the task is in your classroom, you need to make sure that you show how you expect that task to be done. It has to be modeled, so you need to make sure you show it. Again, no matter how little that task is, make sure you are showing the class how you expect it to be done, okay? Also, keep in mind, when I say don't assume that students know how to do everything or anything, please keep in mind their background. Maybe it's their first year in American school, and I can relate to this because when I first started teaching, my teaching career started in Arizona, and my very first classroom was a total of 30 students. I was a third grade teacher, just graduated, and a majority of my students did not speak English because they had just come from Mexico. It was their first time in an American school. So when you are showing those tasks, please keep in mind their background, that maybe your students have never even been in an American school before. So please consider their cultural background as well. And something else I wanted to make sure I mention is that you model every expectation. Again, no matter how little that task is, don't assume because they're third, fourth, or fifth graders that they know how to do this task. Don't assume anything. Don't assume that they know how to do anything or everything. So please model the task, practice it with the class, then have partners practice that task, then practice it as a whole class. Have people come up and practice it in front of the rest of the students. No matter how little it is, sharpening your pencil, raising your hand to leave your seat, anything that needs, or let me rephrase this, anything that you expect the students to do, how you expect them to do it, model it, practice it. Model it, practice it, okay? All right, number two, also keep in mind their home culture. When you're starting that first week, please always keep in mind the home culture. You are not sure what those students are coming from. Again, if it's their first year at a new school, they're coming from a different country possibly. You also have to keep in mind you don't know what happened to that student the night before school, and you don't know what happened that morning. So always keep in mind that if a student seems sad or worried or anxious, it's the first week. So let them adapt and give them time to adapt. So please consider their home culture and where they're coming from, okay? Always make your students feel welcome so they learn to trust you. Trust is such a big word, but a child is not going to feel comfortable until they trust you as an adult. Again, when I say considering their background, you're not sure where they're coming from or what they've dealt with in their life, and they might not trust adults. So please try your best, welcome them every morning with a big smile, welcome them into the classroom so they feel safe when they walk in. Say their name at the door. This is a good way to practice their names the first week. Continue to have them wear a name tag. Make sure you're pronouncing their names correctly. I think that's very important too. But in order, like I said, in order for them to trust you, they have to feel comfortable and they have to feel safe. Okay? Communicate with parents regularly, even if you think that they don't want to be communicated with. Sometimes we as teachers will start new schools and we might hear rumors, oh, none of these parents want to do anything with the school. They don't even want to know how their child's doing in class, yada, 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 yada. Don't pay attention to those rumors. Just communicate with your parents on a regular basis. Send those newsletters home, even if you think that they're not going to read them. Let's just get all that negativity out. And maybe the parents aren't communicating with the school because no one communicates with them. So no matter what neighborhood you're teaching in or what you've heard about the parents, just communicate with them. Send that weekly newsletter. Use the app Remind, which I'm going to use this year. I'm really excited. I've also heard of a new app called Classroom, which is a little bit like Facebook, but it's just for the classroom. And nowadays, parents really just want to text. So there are parents that want to get emails as well, but I would definitely communicate with them on a regular basis. Student and teacher relationships, again, going back, is starting with trust. So you communicating with their parents is also going to build that trust between you and the student in the classroom. Another way to keeping in mind their home culture to build that trust, if you have access to their CUME file that's located in the office, which you should, because 99.9% of teachers have access to those, and if for some reason you don't, ask. I spend one of the days when I'm working in my classroom, I sit down and I look through all of my students' files that are on my class list. This gives me so much good information. Sorry, something in my eye. This gives me so much good information, and I'm not talking just about academics. I'm talking about what school they are coming from. Do they live with mom or dad, or do they live with grandma? Or are they possibly not living with any relatives and they're staying with a friend? You're going to have phone numbers, you're going to have addresses, you're going to have any information or any reports that were done the year before on this child, if there were any documentation, possibly of phone calls home of, has this child been in foster care, or has this child experienced this or that? Or it's just going to have all that information in there to help you communicate with them and communicate with the correct family member. It's also going to have information on who picks up the child. So if you are a new teacher, get those CUME files and go through them. It's going to give you so much solid information that's going to help you build that trust again with the student and build that trust with the family, because both of those are important. Okay. My next reminder, going back to modeling, model everything. Practice it, model it, practice it, model it, practice it again. Routines, procedures, and transitions are such a huge thing for the beginning of the year. And my next video will actually all be about routines, procedures, and transitions. So I'm not going to get into a lot of that right now, but that is something that has to be modeled starting day one of how you expect the students to come into that classroom and what they're to do next. That has to start from the very beginning. Some other examples are, again, considering where the students are coming from. You need to show them, how do they go to the bathroom? Do they raise their hand? Is there a bathroom signal? How do they do that? How do they go to the office or the nurse? Or do they get water in the classroom? Or can they use their water bottle? So again, that goes in with routines and procedures. Show your students where everything is. I always do a tour of my classroom and I do a tour of the school. they need to know where things are. You could also have a way of them showing each other where the things are after you've shown them. Make some kind of game out of it or a scavenger hunt, but they need to have access to everything, know how they're supposed to get up and get it. Do they ask permission? So again, that'll go in with my routines and procedures video, so I don't want to get into that too much, but that's very near and dear to my heart, to have an effective running classroom. So please model it, practice it, model it, practice it. Again, when the students know where the supplies are and how they're supposed to get them, that is going to make them feel comfortable in your classroom. And again, that's going to build the trust with the student. And my next friendly reminder is, and I've mentioned this a little bit, but some students that are coming from, they are coming from another classroom, or they might be coming from a completely different school. So we have to keep that in mind too. Every teacher has a different set of routines, procedures, and expectations, right? It's pretty similar, but we all have our own styles, okay? So keep in mind that when that student is moving from 3rd to 4th, they're walking into a whole new classroom culture. Everything's going to be different. The teacher's different. The students in the classroom are different. How they line up is different. How they go to lunch is different. Maybe they can sharpen pencils in your classroom. Maybe they can't. So we have to consider those little tiny things that we might not think are always a big deal, but going into a new classroom, we have to keep in mind it's new. Everything is new to them. Not only is it the first day for them, but if they're coming from a new school, or they've never, like I said, never have been in an American school, they might not have any friends. So they don't know the teachers, they don't know the principal, they don't know other kids that are within that school. So when we're giving teaching all these routines, these procedures, giving all these expectations, we have to keep that in mind, that these are new routines, these are new procedures. Everything is new for them, so we want to take our time, take it slow, practice, model. Okay, and then the last friendly, well, I have a couple more things, and it's just to make sure that you are prepared, right? We all know that we have to be prepared, and we're all wonderful teachers out there, so we're always preparing. And I want to give a little example though of this last year. Last year, I spent too much time preparing things in my classroom that didn't need to be ready the first day, and the things that needed to be ready the first day weren't. I spent too much time on decorating when I should have spent time on making sure all my students' math books were labeled, which I was hustling and had a bunch of teachers come in and help me to get that done one day, and I should have had that done already. So that's just an example. Please be prepared with the things that are most important. And I'll also be making a video about that, but I know that we want our classrooms to be pretty. We want them to look beautiful, right? Of course, I want my classroom to look wonderful, but at one point you're gonna have to just stop yourself and focus more on the lessons and focus more on the curriculum, focus more on your pacing guide, make sure those copies are made. We all wanna get to the copier before everyone else, right? And just make sure everything is ready for that first day that needs to be. And your room being ready, of course, to make the students feel comfortable is very important. But there's those little tiny things that they're not even going to notice that you could always finish up during the week. Make sure that the items are easy to access for them depending on their age. If you're teaching first grade, you want things to be low, of course, and I've had that problem before where I put things too high, so that's just a little tip. Keep those in mind. Make them easy to access and label everything. So if you have students that don't speak English, make sure it has a picture of what it says on there, just giving those visuals with the label. Something else, when I'm thinking about being prepared, there's two other things. Make sure that you have your transportation list ready to go. You know who rides the bus, you know who walks home, you know who gets picked up, you know who's getting picked up in a car versus whose parent is going to walk and pick them up. This is information that you can get from their CUME file, and it's information that you definitely want to get at open house. You want to have the most recent information. One of my best principals told me the most important thing on the first day of school is to make sure that every student gets home safe and gets where they're supposed to be. That should be your main goal on the first day, because I think that it's just so vital that we know, because that is something we do not want to mess up, right? I know that we're going to have a million things on our mind of what we need to do on the first day of school. Have that transportation list. Walk out with it. Make sure you know where every child is. Get that documentation from open house. If that student is supposed to ride the bus, but they're not riding it that day and Uncle John is picking them up, have that in writing. Very, very important. And I have to say, I think that would be all my tips for now. Oh, one more thing. To make our students, another way to make our students feel comfortable and for us to take a breather, because you know that we get so tired and we talk so much that first week of school. We're just going over expectations, we're modeling, we're talking, we're modeling, we're talking, right? So keep in mind that your students are nervous too. They're tired, they're not used to this schedule yet, they're not used to your expectations, they're not used to your routines yet. So whenever you feel a little overwhelmed, your kids are probably going to feel overwhelmed too. So grab one of your favorite books, sit down on the floor, and read those kids a book. And that is another way for them to connect with you. And I don't care if it's first grade, fifth grade, or sixth grade. Kids love read aloud. So have some of your favorite read alouds ready to go. And just stop what you're doing and let's say, all right, guys, let's take a break. Let's sit down on the floor, because you're going to have plenty of time to teach those routines and procedures. But just keep in mind, they're little humans too, and they're nervous. So I hope these tips will help you on back to school. In my next video, like I said, I'm going to be talking about routines, procedures, and transitions. So I hope that you will keep a lookout for that next video. And thank you for visiting with me on Time to Teach. All right, bye everybody.